Welcome back. The Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has been visiting IDF troops in northern Israel as the Lebanese-based terrorist group Hezbollah continues to fire rockets and missiles at the north. Israel's Foreign Minister Eli Cohen has been meeting with the French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna as she prepares to visit Beirut. And armed men seen looting an aid truck meant for civilians in Gaza. Israel today opened the Kerem Shalom crossing for the first time to allow aid into Gaza, one of the conditions placed upon Israel by its ally, the United States. Well, with me in the studio this hour, Yaki Dayan is the former Israeli consul in Los Angeles. He joins me now. Thanks for being with us.
Good evening.
Yaki,
Thanks.
so a lot of developments to talk about. We will be going into the north in just a moment to get the very latest on the situation there. But in Gaza, I guess the big news this hour is the discovery of that vast terror tunnel.
Yeah. As deep as we go, we discover the tunnels, the length of the tunnels, how deep they are, how wide they are. We had knowledge, obviously, of the tunnels, but seeing that, experiencing the huge tunnels, the billions of dollars that were invested in those tunnels, one could only imagine what could have happened in Gaza if those billions of dollars invested in those attack tunnels would have been invested in the economy and the welfare of the Gazan civilians. So yes, this is not coming as a surprise, but to see how huge they are, that's striking, no doubt.
For now, thank you, Yaki. We're going to go to the north of Israel now. Our Zach Anders is standing by, and there's been a significant escalation today, hasn't there, Zach?
It has, and measuring this against previous days is putting today high above the rest. More than 10 separate attacks. Hezbollah claiming responsibility for some, but not all of these attacks. And the rapid succession of some of these Hezbollah attacks throughout the afternoon, 5 of them came within an hour of each other here along the northern border. And you can only surmise with the context of previous days, as we've reported the IDF retaliatory strikes, that just as many IDF retaliatory strikes must have been taking place throughout southern Lebanon. Large plumes of smoke seen on the cameras pointing north, and quite a bit of activity in the air over our heads and the outgoing artillery all day long.
And there is a debate in Israel, isn't there, about what to do about Hezbollah, because, of course, tens of thousands of Israeli civilians do not want to return to their homes. They can't return to their homes with this very well-armed, well-trained terrorist army on the border. Just talk us through, some of the options that are being discussed.
Well, the diplomatic option is, of course, the first thing on the table, somehow convincing Iran's proxy and Hezbollah to agree to the United Nations 1701 agreement. If that is not possible, the other way is with force, and it does appear that with the posturing coming out of the defense minister's office in the last week with very strong statements regarding the use of force. Today, a military drill, an exercise taking place on the border. It is very clear that the IDF is trying to convey a message, that the entire Israeli government is trying to convey the message that they are willing to use force here against Hezbollah, and that going beyond these airstrikes and using the artillery to hit positions miles away, that they're ready with ground forces, with tanks, with troops to incur in southern Lebanon, which for the people that live here in the north, they remember 2006 very well. They remember that very difficult period, and they are worried for that future.
Zach, thank you very much. Zach Andrews there. While former colonial power France is seeking to influence the situation in Lebanon, the French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna is headed to Beirut tomorrow. Today, she met with her Israeli counterpart. Our senior diplomatic correspondent Owen Alterman has more.
Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen met with his French counterpart Catherine Colonna here at Ben Gurion Airport earlier on in the day. They spoke at the podiums you see behind me and had this to say, Eli Cohen, about the issue of calls for a ceasefire in Gaza.
The Hamas terror organization celebrated last week's UN General Assembly resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire. No wonder they celebrated. It's exactly what they wish for. Let me send a clear message to the international community, to the UN member states. If a terror organization celebrates your decision, it means you have made a wrong decision.
That's a charged message with the French foreign minister standing next to Eli Cohen. Of course, the French government at a relatively early stage, through President Emmanuel Macron himself, having come out and called for that ceasefire that the Israeli government sees at this stage as so unwanted. On another issue, the two sides may well see eye to eye, the issue of Israel's northern border and finding a diplomatic arrangement to move Hezbollah's military presence away from the border north of the Litani River. Here's what Foreign Minister Colonna had to say to a question from I-24 News.
Je me rendrai demain à Beyrouth.
I'll be in Beirut tomorrow, and France, just like its partners, is calling on its Lebanese counterparts to do everything they can to avoid a flare-up in Lebanon that would make it the first victim. And I'll be bringing that message to Beirut. Our partners there, I believe, feel similarly. I would like to add that very clear messages have been sent to Hezbollah as well, so that the security of Israel and of Lebanon, I must add, should not be threatened even more.
For the Israeli government, this is a tricky visit. On one hand, the deep disagreements about the war in Gaza, even with the full-throated expressions of support for the Israeli public from Foreign Minister Colonna, the fact that the French government has come out as such an important European power calling for a ceasefire obviously brings in tension with the Israeli government. On the other hand, I think the understanding in Israel that the French government is certainly not a hostile actor and also has an important role to play in the diplomacy with Lebanon, given France's ties with Lebanon and its special relationship with Lebanon, and the expressed desire of the Israeli government through the statement from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Saturday night and the statements here at these podiums from Foreign Minister Eli Cohen earlier on today that the Israeli government wants a diplomatic solution in Lebanon as a plan A and a military operation only as a plan B. Owen Alterman, I-24 News at Ben Gurion International Airport.
Well, Yaki Dayan is with me in the studio. The Americans, the French, they would like a diplomatic solution to the problem of Hezbollah. Is Israel going to go along with that?
No doubt that they want to, and I think that the preference of Israel is a diplomatic solution as well. The message that has been conveyed in the last few weeks, both to the Americans and to the French, who are a significant actor, significant force in Lebanon and have a lot of influence over there, is that if the situation is not being solved diplomatically, force has to be used by Israel, and that's a message because we have around 70,000 refugees outside their homes. They cannot go back. Definitely, they won't go back to the status quo that existed on October 7th before. So there is an understanding that a significant change has to be made. Now, what is the change? What is the nature of change? The understanding is that the resolution 1701 taken by the Security Council after the Second Lebanon War in 2006 is, I would say, a bit unrealistic, both because I don't see the Hezbollah going northern to the Litani River, nor because of the UNIFIL force, which is a ridiculous force. They're not playing any significant role there. They have no leverages whatsoever on the Hezbollah. So you have to change something which is completely different. Now, what would be the solution? This is a big question, but I would say that Israel is extremely skeptic that a diplomatic solution will eventually force the Hezbollah to move back, if not to the Litani River, so at least 10 kilometers away from the northern border in Lebanon, which means that we haven't seen the end of the war war that is taking place now in the north.
And of course, we have to take into account that the war weariness here in Israel. We're coming up to 3 months of war in Gaza. I mean, will Israel, in terms of, you know, moving forward, will Israel be able to cope with another war on its northern border?
I think that absolutely it has to, but it has to also regain or gain the support of the Americans. They don't want to see the expansion of the war, definitely not in an election year. So they don't want to see the expansion of the war. And the French, who are a significant player, and they don't want to see Lebanon being ruined as being overseeing what is happening in Lebanon. So definitely they don't want to see that. So you have to give some time for a diplomatic solution. If this is not being achieved, so the understanding and hopefully the support will be, and I'm sure that the Americans will support that we'll have to move on into a military solution, a military path on Lebanon. So this is the understanding right now. So everything is being done in order not to go back to the status quo on October 7th.
Quite, and understandably, a lot of Israelis very concerned about having to move back to their homes, and also we have to take into account the economic impacts.
Absolutely.
I think we're joined now by Shadi Khalul, Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Alba Research Centre, a specialist in Hezbollah. Shadi, good to see you. Another visit today by the Defence Minister, Yoav Gallant. Still, though, Hezbollah doesn't seem to be deterred by Israel or by the Americans. Shadi, if you can hear me.
Yeah, can you repeat?
Yes, sure. I was just saying, we saw the Defence Minister, Yoav Gallant, visiting the troops in the north again today, once again warning Hezbollah not to escalate, saying that Israel is ready to attack. Hezbollah doesn't appear to be deterred, does it?
Yes, I don't think Hezbollah is actually deterred, because Hezbollah is willing to drag Israel into war in Lebanon. And this is something that actually we have been noticing at Alma Research and Educating Center before even October 7th. And Hezbollah is using this Hamas-Israel war that he planned together, actually with Hamas and Iran, to drag in Israel also in other front. And he doesn't want to be seen like just following Hamas. He wants to have a front of his own to show the Lebanese that he has a good cause to open this war together with Israel. Let me be clear. We are at war in the northern front already. We've seen today, actually, anti-tank missile in Kibbutz Sasa, hit Kibbutz Sasa, a civilian community here in our border. We see Hezbollah attacking in Kiryat Shmona. We saw Hezbollah attacked in other Western Galilean kibbutzes and communities. And we saw Hezbollah attacking civilian electricians, farmers. We saw him attacking also IDF forces here in the border that are trying to protect our communities. So we are in war. It's not that it's a matter like of escalation and another escalation. It's only a matter of time when Israel would say enough is enough. We will not accept this reality anymore, and allowing Hezbollah to continue attack our communities. And it's just a matter of time when this will open in a full-scale response from Israel's side, which will be maybe later called a third Lebanese war. I can say only one thing to the public so they would understand what is Hezbollah. Hezbollah is Iran. We thinking we are neighboring with Lebanon. Our neighbor today is not Lebanon. Our neighbors today is Lebanon, which is Iran. Syria, which is Iran. Iraq, which is Iran. And Iran, that is Iran. It's all one front Iran. That's who we are confronting. We're confronting the Houthis, who are Iran. So all this one unification of fronts is all Iran. And we need to actually deal with this existential threat that is declaring to annihilate our people, our state, and throw out the Jews out of here, and throw not only Jews, even Christians like me as Israeli citizens will suffer from this enemy. And that's why all citizens of the State of Israel from all backgrounds need to unite against this threat and this enemy, and push the IDF to eliminate this threat, not according to 1701. 1701 is only a joke. It didn't work until October 7. Hezbollah built his post, his towers in the border. He infiltrated the borders. He digged 6 tunnels in our border, crossing tunnels to our territories. He made a terror attack in Megiddo Junction inside, very deep in Israel, and with explosive that maybe just luckily we have very light injury for a Arab Israeli civilian. So Hezbollah is already actually preparing within 1701 rules himself to attack Israel according to his plan to occupy the Galilee, which means opening the borders to even more Palestinian Arabs from Lebanon with full of hatred to attack our communities and commit genocidal actions and atrocities against our population here in the north. This will not be tolerated by our state. We cannot even tolerate, and that's why the public here in Israel and specifically in Northern Front requesting from the government of Israel to eliminate this threat and disarm Hezbollah according to 1559. This should be the resolution that we need to demand from the international community and from the Lebanese government and army. To 1559 is disarming Hezbollah. And only by disarming Hezbollah, we can have peace for the Lebanese people and for us as Israelis and with all Arab countries surrounding us. Hezbollah is attacking Saudi Arabia through Houthis. Hezbollah is attacking UAE through the Houthis. Hezbollah is attacking Iraqis through the Shia militias al-Hashd al-Sha'bi. Hezbollah is participating with Assad to butcher Syrian Muslims and Sunnis and other Syrian citizens. So let me call it this way. Hezbollah is an army of terror, and we should take care of this immediately and eliminate this threat before it's too late.
All right, Shadi, thank you very much. Shadi Khalul there at Alma.
Thank you.
3 quick comments. I went to Shadi's house, and you can see Maroun Aras from the other side. The proximity is striking, and basically he is under the mercy of Hezbollah, because if Hezbollah decides to fire any rocket to his house, they can do that tomorrow, and that the state of Israel cannot allow, cannot permit that citizens within Israel will be threatened by the Hezbollah on a daily basis. That's not an option. The second point is we saw what happened when we gave an immunity to the Hamas. I mean, they for 16 years, they were preparing themselves for a war. And if you go to the northern part, so Hezbollah is much more powerful than the Hamas. So there is a clear understanding that we have to take care of this problem now, and we cannot wait any longer. And the third point, maybe a quick one, is what Shadi mentioned, and this is very correct. I mean, the world today has they don't want to hear about the Iranian problem. But basically what we are dealing now in the Middle East is with the symptoms. If the United States wants the new Middle East, and they want a new Middle East, they cannot deal only with the symptoms, which is Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. They have to deal with the disease itself, with the problem, which is Iran. And as long as we are not dealing with the problem, which is Iran, then you will not achieve any normalization, any new Middle East, which would be a strong Middle East and a very stable Middle East.
Yaki Dayan, thank you very much. Well, let's turn our attentions back to Gaza. Another soldier lost his life in the fighting today, bringing to 122 the number of soldiers who have been killed. Meanwhile, aid to Gaza is for the first time since the war began coming via the Kerem Shalom crossing in Israel. There has been footage of trucks full of aid being looted by armed men. I think we can have a look at those pictures, trucks of aid coming into Gaza. via the Rafah crossing with Egypt being taken over by armed men. Israel's concern, of course, is that that aid will not go to civilians, but will go to Hamas terrorists. And the IDF has uncovered, there we can see the truck there. There we go. Coming in from Rafah, this is aid destined for civilians. You can see chaotic scenes, armed men seen taking the truck and stealing the aid. Well, meanwhile, the IDF has revealed the largest ever Hamas attack tunnel going from the Jabalia neighbourhood all the way up to the Erez crossing with Israel. Let's go to southern Israel for more on that. Our Pia Steckelbach joins us now. Pia, it's absolutely vast, this tunnel, 50 metres deep in some places. I mean, it would put the metro system in Paris or Madrid to shame, wouldn't it? It is that big.
Right, Laura, this was the largest tunnel that was discovered by the Israeli military in the Gaza Strip so far, one of the largest tunnels that it has seen so far. Now, the IDF is expecting to find more of those tunnels, the metro system. Nobody really knows how long it is. The Israeli army estimates that it is several hundred kilometers long, and it is, in fact, underneath all of the areas in the Gaza Strip, the north, the center, and the south. This is at least according to Israel's military estimates there. And if we speak about the fighting that is currently going on in Gaza, of course, in the south, in the Khan Yunis area, in the Rafah area, in the center, in Shuja'iyya, a neighborhood of Gaza City, and of course, fighting is also still ongoing in the north where the IDF says it has operational control that is focused on destroying the remaining military infrastructure belonging to Hamas and other Palestinian militias. We're speaking about tunnels, tunnel openings, tunnel shafts, but also, of course, weapons depots and ammunition. And although, Laura, the IDF says it has at least operational control over the north, about 1.5 hours ago we could see that rockets were launched from the northern part of the Gaza Strip. We are here in Sderot right now we're looking into the areas of Bet Lahia and Bet Hanun, and we saw that the latest barrage of rockets that was targeting the eastern area of Ashkelon for communities there was coming out of the northern part of the Gaza Strip, which not only means that on day 72 of the war, Hamas or other Palestinian militias such as Palestinian Islamic Jihad are still able to fire rockets onto Israel, but also that they're able to do this from the north, where Israel says it has some level of control. There we have seen that that Hamas at least has the capability to still fire rockets much further. We've seen that on Saturday rockets were launched even onto the Jerusalem area. So we do see some restraint in terms of the pace that Hamas is launching rockets. Today we've only had a red alert 3 times around the Gaza area here, but from time to time you can see that Hamas is trying to demonstrate its capability of still being able to fire rockets. Since the last rocket launch, we can see some, or we can also hear some aerial activity. Right now we can hear an Israeli drone. From time to time we have been hearing artillery, which might indicate that, of course, the IDF is now firing back towards the origin of these rocket launches still.
Pia, thank you very much. Pia Steckelbach there in southern Israel with the latest on the fighting in Gaza. As I say, 122 soldiers have now been killed in the fighting. Yaki Dayan, I mean, what is the situation in terms of how much control the IDF has over neighbourhoods in Gaza? We've talked a lot about Shuja'iyya, this neighbourhood, and clearly the IDF is not in control yet of this neighbourhood.
So there are different phases. I would say that in the northern part of Gaza, till the Gaza River, there is an overall control by the Israeli army. Still, there are terrorists everywhere that are popping out from all kinds of tunnels and trying to hit the soldiers. But mainly, the Hamas is not present there. The military force is still present here and there, but definitely not the administration, nor the civilians. The Hamas is not present as a mechanism, as a controlling mechanism in the northern part of Gaza. The situation in the southern part of Gaza, still, I would say in the northern part of Gaza, it would take still few months to clear all those terrorists and the tunnels. Yes, that's a long process, and that would take time, and we have to be extremely patient. The situation in the southern part of Gaza is different. Now, the Israeli army is present in one city, which is Khan Yunis. They are operating there. It's extremely difficult because there are still a lot of civilians, around 200,000 civilians staying there, and hasn't left the city. So the operation is extremely complicated, and we know that part of the leadership of the Hamas is over there in the tunnels, are hiding over there. That's going to be a long process as well. So in this intense phase, we should take that. And having said that, there are still places within Gaza, from cities like Deir el-Balach all the way to the southern part, to the border with Egypt, the border of Gaza with Egypt, to Rafah, and the crossing points there. That still the IDF hasn't been there, hasn't touched those threats, and that would be covered as well by the IDF. So if we're speaking about the intense phase, we're still a few weeks ahead of the intense phase, but still, even when the intense phase would stop, we still face a lot of months of clearing the field and Israel controlling the situation from the military aspects. They will not let any force enter in the upcoming future to deal with the security apparatus or security of the West Bank. The only one that will be allowed to do that are Israeli soldiers.
And what about this new development with the aid, letting aid go into Gaza via the Kerem Shalom crossing? We've seen those very chaotic scenes. I mean, is Israel just allowing aid to fall into the hands of the enemy?
So, as you know, I mean, we were not in favor of any humanitarian aid. We thought that we should connect that with the release of hostages. That was a major leverage that should have been used. But the Americans thought differently, and we have to respect that. They thought that in order to gain more time to continue the war, the intense phase at least, we need to increase the humanitarian aid from 100 trucks to 200 trucks. Now, the inspection on those trucks has to be Israeli inspection. And currently, in the Rafah crossing point, we can inspect only up to 100 trucks. So we had to open the Kerem Shalom as well in order to make sure that the inspection is being made by Israeli soldiers in order to increase the humanitarian aid that the Americans insisted so much. So this is why we see Kerem Shalom now being opened to humanitarian aid, to trucks coming in from there to Gaza.
All right, Yaki Dayan for now. Thank you very much indeed. We're taking a short break, and when we come back, and it was in northern Gaza where one of the biggest tragedies of the war happened. The IDF mistakenly shot dead 3 hostages who'd been held for 70 days, survived and were trying to get to safety. A funeral for one of those hostages has been held today. Hundreds of people attended. We'll talk about that next. Stay with us.
Israel is in a state of war.
Families completely gunned down in their beds. We have no idea where is she.
As our soldiers are fighting on the front lines, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
Welcome back. Hundreds of people have been attending the funeral for one of the hostages who was mistakenly shot by IDF forces on Friday. And the Mossad chief, David Barnea, has been holding talks on releasing the hostages with Qatar's Prime Minister in Norway. That's according to a report on CNN. The meeting has been described as positive. First, though, Israel and the United States knew about a Hamas investment fund worth hundreds of millions of dollars, yet they did nothing to shut it down. Our Robert Swift has the story.
As early as 2015, Israeli and US officials became aware of a network of companies that not only funded Hamas, but were owned and controlled by it. An empire that was worth an estimated $500 million. While organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda have frequently used fronts to launder money, Hamas's portfolio was a genuine enterprise, launched with seed money to go out to make a profit, the New York Times reports. It reportedly included mining, chicken farming and road building firms in Sudan, 2 skyscrapers in the United Arab Emirates, a property developer in Algeria, and Trend, a real estate company listed on the Turkish Stock Exchange. An Israeli financial intelligence team, Task Force Harpoon, began tracking the investments, flagging up their concerns to US counterparts and the Israeli cabinet. But the threat from Iran and the finances it distributed to its proxies, Hamas among them, ultimately eclipsed fears over the Hamas portfolio. And at the time, the Israeli Security Service's consensus was that money flowing into Gaza would help tame Hamas, rather than arming it for the next attack. A strategy led by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Regarding this published investigation, I am not familiar with it and I suggest you wait until after the war. A thorough examination and a thorough investigation of all these things will be done and the picture will become clearer.
While there were some sanctions placed on businesses and individuals in 2022, ultimately the flow of money from it was not disrupted. Money that Israeli intelligence assesses was directly invested into Hamas's military preparations.
Yaki Dayan is with me in the studio. He's the former Israeli consul in Los Angeles. So hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, we know that the Hamas leadership in Qatar are worth billions of dollars, but they had an actual investment fund investing in chicken farms in Sudan and other.
So I'll tell you what, I know about this operation extremely well. When I was a chief of staff to the foreign minister, I came to know this extremely very important tool that Israel was using in order to track the terrorism, the money that the terrorists are using. As you know, this is the oxygen of terrorism. And if you stop blocking the money of terrorism, then you can deal with the terrorist organization, whether it's Hezbollah or Iran or Hamas. Now, in order to and there was an excellent cooperation between us and the Americans. The Americans were extremely devoted to that. But the difference is that when you use such a tool, you have to create an international network in order to block those money from flowing into the terrorist networks. But once Israel took a decision to allow the Qatari money, billions of dollars,
famous suitcases full of
exactly, to come in. So countries came to Israel and said, you know, this is a joke. You are dealing with the terrorist money and all kinds of. You're trying to block this money, but at the same time you're opening the different gate and you are lying publicly. in daylight to money entering Gaza. So I would say that this operation failed, and we have to take responsibility for that. And this is the oxygen of terrorism. And if we want to deal now with all the terrorist organizations, Hamas in the future, and Hezbollah, and any other organization, we have to make sure that we know from where the money comes and block it. As Tom Cruise said in the movie, show me the money.
Right, well, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it was Prime Minister Netanyahu himself who said that terrorism needs three things: funding, territory, and ideology, was it? I mean, so he violated his own...
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that was a huge mistake, not the only one, unfortunately, made by Israel. And this has to be studied, and we have to take conclusions, draw conclusions from this, I would say, shanda, from this thing, and make sure that in the future we track the money and we block the money, and we have to create an international network for that. So I hope that this is one more thing that would be studied after October 7th.
All right, yeah, thank you. Well, Alon Shamriz was a resident of Kfar Aza. He was taken hostage by Hamas terrorists on October 7th and held captive for 70 days. He then tried to escape and was mistakenly killed by IDF troops on Friday. It has been one of the hardest things for Israelis to deal with. His funeral took place today in central Israel. Hundreds of people were there. Heartbreaking speeches from members of his family. Take a listen.
We turned over every stone, knocked on every table for us to be reunited, but it wasn't enough. We didn't do everything, but you did. You were on your own journey in the dark without glasses. You were held by monsters in harsh conditions. No water, no food, no oxygen, and no daylight. You went through all this and ran. You acted bravely. That is reserved for unique people like you. And you waited for redemption. I talked about you so much in every meeting or interview. But I didn't say how brave you are. You always knew what was good for you. You did things your way. And this time too, you ran away against all odds and did all things to get home. My poor brother, what happened to you in those moments when you already saw the light? It became dark. Whoever abandoned you also murdered you after you did everything right.
Horrendous. The brother of Alon, who's one of the three hostages who managed to escape and was mistakenly shot dead by IDF troops in Gaza over the weekend. Well, with me now, Advocate Ori Slonim is the former Special Advisor to Ministers of Defence on hostages and missing people. Thank you very much for being with us, sir. I mean, it's heartbreaking, isn't it, to see that? And this really does ramp up the pressure on the government to get those hostages home as soon as possible.
Yes, I believe it's an awful situation, and I think it's part of the awful things that are arising from a state of war, being in the midst of all these awful situations as a soldier, and I believe that it was a great mistake.
Let's talk about the possible negotiations then. We're hearing that the Mossad chief, David Barnea, has been meeting Qatar's Prime Minister in Norway. CNN reporting that the meeting was positive. Are you hopeful that some kind of agreement could be reached to get the hostages home?
You know, as somebody who is dealing with these matters for so many years, I never predicted, and I never even put my thoughts, even to myself, about such a stage of discussions, of meetings. The only thing which I can rely on is the outcome, if it is true or not. So all these stages of before the result, for me, it's nothing. I don't want to be up and down. I don't want the families to be up and down. And from my point of view, only result.
You think it's best not to talk about these ongoing negotiations, but I mean, you can understand the families. They're desperate for any kind of information to know what's happening, and we saw, a lot of pushback when Barnea was supposed to go to Qatar and then he wasn't. I mean, people are really hanging on for any shred of information, aren't they?
It depends of what kind of information. If it is just about the fact that people are meeting, and I believe it can bring some hope, it's okay. But starting to try to find what is in the meeting, and if there are more optimistic hopes or less, I think it breaks your heart. So it's better, I believe, it's better to know that they are meeting. It's better to know that somebody is taking this role for you, for all the hostages. But I prefer not to doing along the way. About most of the things are hopes and beliefs and some presumption, whatever. But the only thing is the end result. This is the only thing which matters.
I mean, I've heard it said that in the past, in terms of previous hostage negotiations, it was better for the leadership not to speak or to meet too much with the families of the hostages, because, of course, they would pay any price to get their loved ones back, whereas the government, the leaders have to be clear-headed about it. Are things different now, do you think? Because this is such an awful situation. So many people are being held. So many people are affected by this.
First of all, I don't really know if it is if this was the real situation in the past. As far as I know, and I had participated in hundreds of meetings between the country leaders and families. I never saw. I can't remember a demand of a family to see the prime minister or defense minister, and that he refused. I don't remember such a situation, never. He's responsible. He's the responsible one.
Mm-hmm. The prime minister says there will be no hostage release without the military pressure. Do you agree with him on that?
I don't want to say anything about it, because I believe that even I'm in the picture, I don't know everything, so I prefer not to comment about it. I think that the best way is, first of all, to negotiate at all times, never put it aside, and to bring it to the best result you can.
Oris Lonim, thank you very much.
Thank you, and let's hope that all of them will come home very, very quickly.
Absolutely. We're all hoping for that. Thank you very much. Well, meanwhile, more bleak news from the United States. 2/3 of young Americans between 18 and 24 believe that Jews as a class are oppressors and should be treated as oppressors. That's according to a new poll conducted by Harris Insights and Analytics and Harvard University. The poll also found that 51% of that age group believe that the long-term answer to the conflict is for Israel to be ended and given to Hamas and the Palestinians. Generally, though, on a brighter note, bipartisan support for Israel among Americans is high. 63% of Democrats and 71% of Republicans believe that the United States is right to support Israel in its war against Hamas. Well, joining me now, Isabella Tabarowski is the Senior Advisor at the Kennan Institute and the Wilson Center and a Fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. Thank you very much for being with us.
It's good to be here.
And Isabella, you're an expert in anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism in the Soviet Union. Do you see any similarities with that and with what is now happening in the United States?
Well, the similarities are extraordinary. We see them in the rhetoric that the anti-Israel protesters use. It's the rhetoric that brands Israel as an imperialist, settler, colonialist, genocidal, terrorist, fascist, racist, apartheid state that's engaged in genocide, that's branding Zionism in the same kind of terms, that's calling Zionists liars and manipulators, and says that Zionists own all of the politicians and bankers and media people in the US. This is rhetoric that we heard in the Soviet Union going back to 1967 and onward. It was a massive part of Soviet international propaganda for 25 years. And it's really extraordinary to see it being resurrected on American campuses and in American streets today.
And of course, the Soviet Union collapsed. It is no more. But this is kind of an enduring legacy, isn't it?
Well, that's right. To the point where some people are starting to question whether the Soviet Union really, in fact, lost the Cold War, because there is some intellectual legacy, propagandistic kind of legacy that endures. And the one way to think of it is that these ideas, the anti-Zionist ideas, the anti-Israel ideas, became part of the global left already in the 70s and 80s under the Soviet influence. You can see it from tracking some of the publications, as I have done over the last several years. And so it continued. It remained on the fringes, especially after the collapse of the USSR. And then at some point, it begins to move into the center under the influence of multiple trends and forces. And here we are hearing the very same things. And I was born in the Soviet Union, and many Soviet Jews who are of my generation will say that they're having an incredible deja vu. Precisely the kind of rhetoric and the kind of attitudes that we all fled are back in America again.
And chillingly, it also has echoes of what happened in Nazi Germany, of course, when Jewish students and professors, Jewish teachers were barred from their studies. And also, what comes to mind is the Durban conference, of course, when the anti-Zionism is when the Zionism is racism resolution was passed, and the UN chief at the time was a former Nazi, wasn't he, Kurt Waldheim? I mean, these ideas are really coming back to the fore, aren't they?
Well, that's right. And what's interesting about it is, of course, before, and I think part of the reason we're all so surprised, or so many people are so surprised and shocked by it, is that for many decades after World War II, the thought was that the main danger for the Jews comes from the right, because the Nazi ideology is a far-right extremist ideology that today it lives in the neo-Nazi circles. The anti-Zionist ideology appears to be coming from the left, from the progressive forces. And it's a real turnaround for many people. They don't understand how it can happen that all of a sudden the danger for the Jews comes from the left. But of course, there's actually, if you know history, there isn't that much of a surprise. It's just that most people don't actually know this history.
Yeah, anti-Semitism takes on different forms and guises over the century, doesn't it, from the Middle Ages and all throughout history. I mean, this does, though, now represent a demographic time bomb for Israel, doesn't it? What can be done about it?
Well, look, I mean, that is really the question that all of us have to think about. I'm afraid that there are no easy solutions, because I think that what we're seeing is a result of education in American universities, and also increasingly in schools, pre-university, K through 12, as it's called. And this is related to the ideology that has arisen, for which there isn't really a single term, but it's some kind of a combination of neo-Marxist, post-colonial studies, which and very much based on identity, assigning hard identity and then dividing the world based on these identities. And so based on this ideology, Jews are now part of the white oppressor class. And based on that, and we've seen this over and over again, that, another part of this ideology is the so-called DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which sounds really, really great, right? That's what's so deceptive and hard with it, is that everybody wants diversity and everybody wants inclusion, except that the name is deceptive. And one of the things that this ideology is known for is to target Jews as representatives of the oppressed classes, and therefore, they're people that we need to decenter, to use the new term. And so, it seems that we have a whole generation of people who have now been brought up in this way. So we need to be looking at the curriculum in schools, universities, and I'm afraid that it's not going to be very quick.
All right. Isabella Tabarovsky, thank you very much. Great to talk to you as always.
Thank you.
Yaki Dayan, pretty bleak news from the US.
I would say that there is an unholy trinity now in the United States among the youngsters, the ages between 18 to 24, which is a lot of ignorance, anti-Semitism, and woke progressiveness. And when you add to that tools like the social media and especially TikTok with the Chinese algorithm, so it creates a very deadly mechanism that creates all this wave of anti-Semitism today in the United States. But, you know, I'll give you one quote by Mark Twain that gives me a lot of optimism. He said once about his dad that when he was 18, he thought that his dad was an idiot. And when he reached the age of 24, he couldn't believe how much his father studied during those years. So I hope that we'll give them few years and this wave of ignorance, anti-Semitism, and woke progressiveness wrapped with all kinds of ideologies, as we heard, semi-Marxism and all kinds of other ideologies will vanish, and they will realize that the truth is a bit different than how they picture it as black and white oppressor and all kinds of things like that.
Right. I mean, it's absurd, isn't it, to hear Jews talked about as oppressors. Never in history has there been a people so dispossessed. And so persecuted. Yeah. I mean, and this kind of ideology completely glosses over all of the Jews who were kicked out of Arab countries.
Absolutely, you know, but that's the combination of
historical.
Absolutely. I mean, if you learn history, so there is a lot of ignorance here. I mean, people think that Israel was established 75 years ago, but it was re-established 75 years ago. But then you have to go to the roots of the studies of what happened here in Palestine way before, and if there was any Palestinian state, which was never, ever a Palestinian state. So you go back to history and there is a lot of ignorance and a lot of anti-Semitism and woke progressiveness, which with all those nice ideologies. And then you reach all kinds of preachers at the age of 18 in TikTok that tells you how Israel is the oppressor.
It's easier to click on a TikTok video, isn't it?
Exactly, and have millions of followers. And it's nice and easy, but it's not true.
All right, Yaki Dayan, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, on the morning of October 7th, Yariv Hajbi, a farmer living in the communities around Gaza, woke up to the realization that his entire family was under attack by terrorists in the nearby Moshav of Yachini. Yariv did not think twice. He picked up a weapon and took 3 of his friends to the village, where he found himself caught in the crossfire between the IDF and the Hamas terrorists. We accompanied Yariv to the place where he risked his life to save his family. Take a look.
שבת, 7/10 בבוקר, מתעורר כמו כולם, הרעש של הבומים. אללהו אכבר! יוצא מיד החוצה, עושה סיבוב במושב, בניר משה. הבנתי שמשהו פה לא בסדר. ואז אחרי כמה דקות אמא שלי מתקשרת אליי מכאן, יכיני, ואומרת לי הם כאן. אומרת יש מחבלים, ואז תוך כדי אני מחזיק את בטלפון והיא אומרת לי שהם ירו באח שלי. באותו רגע כשאמא שלי אמרה לי את זה, שהם ירו בו, אז הלכתי לחבר, אספתי אותו ועוד 2, היינו 4, כולנו עם נשקים, ובעצם טסנו תוך 3-4 דקות הגענו לכאן. פרקנו מעבר לגבעה שם וירדנו בשדות החשופים עד לסוללות כאן למטה. ובדרך הסוללות, בחלק הנסתר שלהן, התחלנו להתקדם. ראינו 3 או 4 מחבלים פה. התחלתי לראות לכיוון כדי לנסות למשוך אותם אלינו, כדי להרחיק אותם מהבתים. התחיל הרבה ירי עלינו. הבנו שמישהו יורה עלינו. בשלב מסוים בעצם הגיע איזשהו כוח צבאי כאן, ובעצם חיפשו את המחבלים. הם ראו אותנו, ובעצם כנראה התחילו לירות עלינו, ואז גם שלחו עוד איזשהו כוח לאגף אותנו מצפון-מזרח, ואז הבנו שהסיטואציה היא מאוד מאוד בעייתית, זה היה כבר עם נשקים עלינו. זרקתי את הנשק, הרמנו ידיים וחברנו אליהם ככה בצעקות ובהבנה שאנחנו לא אויב. הכוח המשיך לשם ואנחנו בעצם נשארנו פה לבד. התחלנו לסרוק את כל המשקים פה ובעצם לתאר את האזור. כל האזור הזה היה בעצם הסוכה של ההורים שלי, כי זה היה סוכות. אח שלי שכב כאן בתוך הסוכה. כל זה היה דם עד לכניסה, עד למדרגות שם. כל האזור הזה בעצם היה מלא בתרמילים. וזה כל הכדורים שאספתי פה בעצם. בשלב מסוים הגעתי לאיזושהי יחידת דיור של השכנים שלי שהם בני דודים. ראיתי שבעצם היא נעולה. הזעקתי איזשהם שני ימ"מניקים שהיו פה בסביבה. ביצענו פריצה פנימה באש, ואז גילינו שהבן דוד שלי בעצם ירוי בפנים. כנראה מת מאיבוד דם. הם ירו בו באותה סיטואציה עם אח שלי, זאת אומרת שכולם התפזרו מהר כשהבינו שיש פה מחבלים. הוא הצליח להגיע ליחידת דיור שלו. לנעול אותה מבפנים, אבל הוא עבר יותר מדי זמן. יש לנו עוד חיים שלמים להתמודד עם כל האובדן הזה. ושום דבר עוד לא התחיל בעצם. יש פה מלחמה מסביב, כי היישוב מפונה. וזה... הכל מבולבל. אתה רק מחכה שכל יום יסתיים, אם אתה מצליח להירדם ולעבור הלאה, לעוד יום ולעוד יום. זה הקושי המנטלי, הנפשי הכי גדול פה. כי האובדן הוא אובדן, אבל אנחנו עוד לא בכלל בעצם מתמודדים איתו.
Well, stay with us on I24 News. Kalev Ben-David is here. He'll pick up our live coverage right after this short break. Don't go away.
Israel is in a state of war.
Families completely gunned down in their beds. We have no idea where is she.
As our soldiers are fighting on the front line, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
Welcome to this special broadcast on I-24 News. I'm Caleb Ben David. It is day 72 of Israel's war against Hamas. The deaths of 2 more IDF soldiers killed in Gaza fighting announced today, bringing combat fatalities there to 122 as the army uncovers the biggest Hamas terror tunnel yet. Now, the first trucks passed through the reopened Keren Shalom crossing today, carrying humanitarian goods into Gaza, as footage from the Strip shows Hamas terrorists and civilians battling over aid shipments. The IDF strikes a terror cell in South Lebanon, preparing to launch anti-tank missiles across the border as Hezbollah continues its aerial barrage into northern Israel. And in the West Bank, an IDF reservist is moderately wounded after being stabbed in a convenience store, while Palestinians report 4 killed overnight in an Israeli drone attack on a terror cell in Tulkarem. As I just mentioned, the giant tunnel leading from deep inside Gaza right to the Israeli border, the biggest Hamas attack tunnel yet found, was unveiled today by the IDF. It is yet another example of how Hamas took international aid intended for civilian residents of the Strip and exploited it for their own nefarious purposes. Our senior defense correspondent Jonathan Regev was given a rare inside look at that tunnel by the IDF. He filed this report.
It is nearly 3 miles long, more than 2 meters high, and wide enough for cars to drive here. If anyone wondered what Hamas did with the giant funds provided every month, this is the answer.
This tunnel had every infrastructure needed: cement, electricity, water, and also various hiding places for weapons, meaning it was ready for use. And the shaft that is very close to the Israeli border, roughly 400 meters or so, a quarter of a mile from the Israeli base of Erez, less than 2 minutes, and the terrorists are already in Israeli territory.
It's the biggest tunnel found in Gaza so far. Hundreds of terrorists could come to this point practically undetected.
This tunnel runs for miles and miles into Gaza, into towns like Bet Hanun, Bet Lahiya, 2 or 3 miles inland. The terrorists come all the way up here, and then the shaft being on the other side. Once they come up to the ground, they're merely 400 meters or a quarter of a mile away from the Erez crossing, the Erez base.
Just before the tunnel is demolished, the IDF showed us what the money envelopes from Qatar are really used for.
Hamas, as a terror organization, showed his face using his money only for terror. All of his investment only for terror, not for the civilians of Gaza. He doesn't care about the civilians of Gaza. They're only being used for one thing, for being a human shield.
The tragedy that Hamas is putting its own people in does not end there. The Erez crossing was the place through which 17,000 workers from Gaza crossed in every day to work in Israel and earn wages far higher than they could in Gaza. The adjacent Erez base was built only to allow for humanitarian cases from Gaza to be treated in Israel, but these were exactly the targets Hamas was looking for.
We saw what happens in the tunnel inside. Now let's see what happens outside. Right behind me is the shaft. From here, the terrorists come to the ground. And just to my left, about 400 meters, a quarter of a mile, you see the concrete wall. That is the Israeli border. That is the Israeli base of Erez. You can see it right over there. Nothing more than a 2-minute run, and the terrorists are already there. That is all it took them to get from this position and into Israel.
And in a war so full of terrible symbols, here's another one. 3 soldiers were kidnapped from the Erez base. On the day the tunnel was unveiled, 2 of those soldiers were pronounced dead.
2 of my soldiers that were kidnapped alive from this base on the 7th of October was murdered by Hamas militants while were in captive inside the Gaza Strip. So for me personally and for my unit, it's a very complicated day.
Every corner of the Erez crossing and the Erez base serve as a reminder of what happened here on that terrible morning. Just a few hundred meters away, the mission ahead is clear.
Without demolishing the tunnel project of Hamas, we cannot demolish Hamas.
This may be the largest tunnel in Gaza, or at least the largest one uncovered so far, but many, many other small ones exist all across the Gaza border. This is where the hostages were taken deep into Gaza, and from there disappearing all across the Strip. Israel, among other missions, now needs to destroy all of these tunnels to make sure that such a thing never, ever happens again. Jonathan Regev, I-24 News.
And joining us in studio for more is Reserves IDF Brigadier General Israel Relik Shafir. He's the former commander of the Tel Nof Air Force Base and a former combat pilot, and our senior defense correspondent, Jonathan Regev. And Jonathan, that tunnel, it's a piece of work. I have actually once got a chance to be inside when they were cleaning it out, Israel's national water carrier, the huge big pipe that brings almost all of Israel's water in the south from the Kinneret. And it's about the dimensions of that tunnel.
Pretty much. Very, very wide. Cars could easily go by. We wondered how so many terrorists, how so many vans got just so close to the Israeli border. This is the answer. This is one tunnel that I've seen. Are there others of this dimension, maybe a bit smaller? Probably yes. Now, some more images that come out today. The people responsible for these images, we can see perhaps the men driving there inside this tunnel. The men sitting right next to him, is Muhammad Sinwar.
And they're driving inside the tunnel.
Muhammad Sinwar, if the last name sounds familiar, it's not by chance, the brother of Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza. He was the man responsible for building this tunnel. They are driving in a car, comfortably driving, inside the tunnel that we've seen. So when so many people asked, how was it possible for so many vans to drive right up to the Israeli border without being detected? This is the answer in tunnels such as this one. It's a huge
infrastructure. It's a huge infrastructure project. People from the engineer corps that I've been speaking with said that a project of this kind takes at least three years to build, tens of millions of dollars. And here we can see this is Hamas footage obtained by the Israeli army in the operation in Gaza. This is actual Hamas footage of the digging of this tunnel. Doors, there are many hideouts within this tunnel. The tunnel was ready for use. There's electricity, there's water, there's ventilation, there's everything you need. There are different rooms to pile up ammunition, weapons, for example. Here we're seeing one of them. Everything you can imagine. Tens of millions of dollars. There you can see various extensions inside this tunnel. Hideouts, weapons could be here. Possibly hostages could be here. We don't know exactly where they are. This is one tunnel. There are many such tunnels. Hostages could be there. A huge infrastructure. And we spoke here so many times, Kalev, about the money envelopes coming into Gaza, right? Those $100 a month going supposedly to families. Right. Were they going to families? When we see this, I think the answer is no. This is where the money went through, and this is just as we saw in the story. This is the distance from the Erez crossing, very close. And huge dimensions. This tunnel was now unveiled by the IDF. A huge project costing millions and millions of dollars. All this money, all this concrete, for example, cement, that could be used for hospitals, for new homes in Gaza, for schools, for mosques, for anything, for welfare. This is what it is being used for.
And Relic, seeing an installation of this kind is daunting, especially since we have to consider there may be more, and certainly are going to be more, for example, when Israel has to deal with the southern half of the Gaza Strip, places like Khan Yunis.
Yes, but I would not be too excited by this. We knew that this was taking place. We knew that the cement was used for this. There's really nothing surprising that was not known before. And Hamas had been readying itself for a time like this for quite a while, as well as Hezbollah up in the north.
Right.
We know of one big tunnel that was discovered up in the north, and there may be some more. So we should not underestimate the task ahead of us. We should not underestimate the abilities of Hamas and Hezbollah, as has been proven in this particular war. And we shouldn't complain, because they are arch enemies. They said they're going to go for us whenever they can, and they did. So we were somewhat dormant, taking this seriously. Too much patting on our own back.
Well, then we are complaining then about that.
And this is what war is all about.
Right. But shouldn't have waited decades for this moment to come, maybe too long, to give to Hamas to prepare for it. Let's go to our correspondent, Pia Stekelbach, who is down south near the Gaza border. Just daunting seeing the task, seeing that tunnel. Pia, fighting goes on there, not far from you, still in northern Gaza. You could understand it, seeing that kind of tunnel. And of course, we've seen over the weekend this tragic incident with the hostages in Gaza, just how much still has to be done, even as Israel is trying to push on now into Khan Yunis in the south.
Right, you're right to say, Kalev, that fighting is going on really all across the Gaza Strip. Of course, in Khan Yunis in the south, then in Shuja'iyya in central Gaza, but also operations are continuously going on in the north. We can look into Bet Lahia, Bet Hanun, from where we're at right now, here from Sderot. You can look into northern Gaza, and about 2 hours ago, we could see that latest barrage of rockets that was launched from Gaza going out into Israel, targeting communities east of Ashkelon, and we could actually see that those rockets were getting launched from the northern part of Gaza, not very far away from here. This is despite the idea of saying that they have at least operational control over northern Gaza, but still Hamas is able to launch rockets from exactly that area onto Israel. And we have seen that although the pace has become a bit slower, there were about 3 alerts throughout today. The Hamas is still showcasing its ability, its capacity to fire rockets onto central Israel and even onto Jerusalem, as we've seen last Saturday. today. Now, the fighting here in the north is really focused on destroying Hamas's infrastructure and the infrastructure of other Palestinian militias. We're speaking about the destruction and, first of all, a discovery of more of those tunnels, of that vast tunnel system, and, of course, the destruction here in northern Gaza, but also destruction of weapon ammunition depots. That is what the operation in the north here is focused on. But, of course, there is fighting going on also in Shujaiya, an urban environment, the entire Gaza Strip is very densely populated. And this is a really close-knit neighborhood as well, which poses immense challenges to those IDF soldiers operating there on the ground. This is also, of course, where in an ambush last week, 9 soldiers all at once were killed, because this just shows you how great the danger of ambushes are or is in such a densely built environment.
All right. Pia Steckelbach there by the Gaza border in southern Israel and Sderot. Thank you for that. And Relic, hearing, as Pia is saying, seeing those rockets still being fired from northern Gaza, but then you see those tunnels and you understand perhaps, at least in some ways, how they're able to still act. Those units, or the Hamas units, are still able to enact even in the northern half of the Strip.
Yes, but we should, let's take a little balanced look. Hamas and Hezbollah have no air force, no tanks, no armored vehicles.
Right.
They're fighting from tunnels. They're using human shields. And they've taken a toll of several thousand. Terrorists have already been killed.
Right.
So the ratio that we're talking about and the devastation of Gaza reflects the balance of power between Israel and Hamas. And if we have to fight Hezbollah in the north, it'll be a little different, but not much different. Remember that we have the shields from their rockets, and very few Israelis were hit.
Right.
So let's balance it. Israel is a lot more powerful. And although we are kind of looking through spectacles at everything that happens in Gaza, and we're all seeing what war is all about. But at the end of the day, we're way overpowering Gaza in any way you want to.
I don't think it's a question of the feeling that the IDF can't handle the situation. I guess it's more a question of the cost that it's going to have. And then there is, again, the time element. Because there is a time element at play here. There is a so-called diplomatic window. And clearly, when you see something like that, you understand why, for example, I'm sorry, the IDF spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, is about to speak. Let's take a listen.
Good evening. Today we exposed a special mission of the IDF forces detecting the largest terror tunnel found so far in the Gaza Strip. Special units along with infantry, led by the Gaza Division, led the force. It's a network, a vast network of tunnels costing millions of dollars, and tens of terrorists built it. This project was led by Muhammad Sinwar, the brother of Yahya Sinwar. He led it personally. So far, we exposed more than 4 kilometers of the path of this tunnel. It's a flagship project for Hamas. It's 50 meters deep, under the ground. Inside the tunnel, we found weapons, ammunition. The tunnel did not cross into Israel. It came very close to the Erez crossing, the place that allowed many Palestinians crossing into Israel for work and for medical assistance. Hamas on the 7th of October chose to slaughter this place, this crossing that was a place for hope for Palestinians. That was the choice of Hamas. It's not a regular tunnel. It's a city, a terror city under the ground. Hamas built it instead of investing the money in the citizens of Gaza. The tunnel detected was used for offensive purposes against our forces in the Gaza Strip. A few days ago, there were images of terrorists killed inside a tunnel. We will soon enough expose more underground cities. We will take care of them, we will kill terrorists there, and we will destroy them. Our forces continue to fight Hamas in the northern Gaza Strip and in the southern Gaza Strip, anywhere where there are terrorists. Today there were statements from Hamas officials saying they will return hostages only after the fire will end. It is important to stress, the IDF will continue to dismantle Hamas. Our forces continue to act bravely all over the Gaza Strip. The statements of Hamas regarding the hostages show that Hamas is worse than ISIS. Who would hold women, elderly, children, citizens? Only a murderous terror organization like Hamas. We have the moral responsibility to do everything to bring back all of the hostages back home. And we continue to act and do every effort possible with intelligence, with the operations and other means, with all the power to achieve this goal. Today we showed images of a home that the three hostages were kept very close to the place where the tragedy took place on Friday. We don't know how long they were there. We're inspecting another home where they possibly were. We're continuing to investigate this incident and learn the lessons. The Chief of Staff was on the ground with the soldiers, and he spoke about the initial conclusions of this incident. We continue to support the families in this very difficult hours. In the north, we attacked various sites of Hezbollah in Lebanon, weapon depots, and other installations. We also attacked terror squads in Lebanon. We attacked more than 120 terror squads since the beginning of the war. South Lebanon today is a war zone and will continue to be so as long as Hezbollah will continue to be spread there and attack from there. The citizens of southern Lebanon know that, and they will continue to feel our attacks as long as Hezbollah terrorists are there. This will be a war zone. Today in the afternoon, a terrorist stabbed a reserve officer near the village of Rantis. The reserve officer chased him and opened fire. Later on, our forces captured the terrorist. And in the refugee camp of Ashams, we conducted another operation where we attacked from the air a terror squad which put our forces in danger. We carried out arrests and confiscated weaponry. We will continue to fight terrorism in the West Bank and in every possible arena. In the home front, I call the citizens, the residents, to keep on watching the home front instructions. We have to remember that even if there are less and less rockets, Hamas still has the ability to fire. Moreover, there was supposedly a document by the IDF which says that residents can go back to the Gaza border communities. It's a rough draft that we are inspecting together with the heads of communities in the south. This is nothing official yet. When we make a decision, an official decision, we will update the residents, the citizens. Please be patient and we will update when things are final. Question now. You're telling us that you exposed a giant tunnel on the border fence. Can you please speak about the intelligence failure of how this tunnel was not detected for so long, if it was built for so long, and what's the probability that there are more tunnels of this kind that we're not aware of? This is just one of various projects. There are a few places. We've looked at 3 arenas. We will expose the other arenas where we think there are tunnels of this kind, terror cities. Within this operation, we're being asked, why is this war taking so long? And the answer is that we're dealing with terror cities under the ground as just together with the fighting on the ground. And we want to permanently destroy these terror tunnels, and it takes time. Regarding this specific tunnel, it was a flagship project of Mohammed Sinwar. Some of it may have been attacked in the past and reconstructed. I cannot give all of the information we have so far, but the bottom line is that this is a project, a flagship project that was waiting to attack the Erez crossing. It was used during this war after the October 7th attack. We exposed it, we killed terrorists there, and we will continue to expose more infrastructure and expose their underground infrastructure.
All right, we just heard the IDF spokesperson, Rear Admiral Daniel Agari, give his nightly briefing, focusing on that, as we've been reporting, that giant terror tunnel that was detected by the IDF. He also, by the way, some news there, the spokesperson referring to a plan that would allow some residents of the Gaza Strip border area, the Gaza envelope, return to their homes. That actually is the first even indication we've had of that from the IDF, though it has to be said, many of those homes are not there to return to, were destroyed, of course, by Hamas. And just to pick up on the point that I mentioned, that the threat of the tunnels, of course, just indicates just the dimensions of the task ahead for the IDF and the timetable, as even the Admiral Hagari said, and that this is an operation that is going to take a considerable amount of time, maybe more than some people expect it to.
That is true, but if we're holding that area, I'm not talking about the tunnels.
Right, I understand.
But the general area, we won't need so much aerial support once you control the area.
Right.
And it's just a question of getting down to those tunnels, neutralizing them, etc., which is a delicate task.
And potentially costly.
True. And that is why it's going to be a lower intensity war above the ground with a higher intensity dealing with the tunnels underground in various measures. You don't have to go in with soldiers in order to take them out, and we won't go into details how this is
right.
going
So I'll just add some reports about, just for some, pumping seawater, for example, one example of one measure that's been reported, but others certainly the IDF will have. They won't make public. Relic Shafir, stay with us, and Jonathan Regev, we are going out for a brief break. We'll be back just in a few minutes with lots more of our coverage. Israel's war against Hamas on day 72. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
The I-24 News Channel, broadcasting from Israel, with dozens of correspondents throughout the world, brings the truth from Israel to hundreds of millions of people in scores of countries.
Completely gunned down in their beds.
De la frontière qui sépare Israël.
The state of emergency and war in Israel.
Bringing Israel's story to the world. I-24 News Channels. Now on Hot.
Amazing. So shout out to our organisers.
Welcome back to this special broadcast on I-24 News. Now, we spent all of the half hour really focusing on the central Gaza battlefield. But again, more action along Israel's northern border. As we reported, airstrike by the IDF against the terror unit trying to fire anti-tank missiles. And of course, that aerial attack still going on. Let's go to our Zach Anders in northern Israel. And Zach, again, another day, another volley of cross-border firings. The IDF apparently taking out a unit there that was firing or getting ready to fire those anti-tank missiles that really have been perhaps the most dangerous weapon for Israel that we've seen fired across the northern border.
And they will continue to be a threat so long as Hezbollah is allowed within a few miles of the border, because that's the range of these ATGMs. Now, remember that they're designed to penetrate the armor of tanks, so they don't explode when they initially hit their target. They're designed to penetrate thick layers of steel and then explode after the penetration. So it is a serious weapon, and it has that range launched by personnel on the ground of several miles, just like mortars and artillery does. So this buffer that the Israelis are trying to create, at least to start, and the language that we're hearing come out of talks with the U.S., France, the U.K., is that they want to start with just a several miles buffer along the border, along this blue line with the UN agreement between Lebanon and Israel, and then begin to push Hezbollah back above the Litani River, which is, again, that UNSC 1701, the United Nations Security Council agreement from 2006. It does not appear that there's been any movement on those talks. Hezbollah does seem to be scoffing at even the idea, again, repeating claims that we've heard for decades, especially during the 2006 war, that they lay claim to this territory. They believe that northern Israel is a part of southern Lebanon. So this is another stalemate here.
Right, and Zach, we maybe have to point out the IDF spokesperson, Admiral Hagari, this evening, for the first time talking about the IDF looking at a plan that would allow some of the residents of the so-called Gaza envelope, that area and probably more around northern Gaza, where IDF has established some control, to start going back to some of their communities and homes, those that still exist. But of course, no such indication at all of that possibility for the residents in the north, tens of thousands that still are basically internal refugees here in Israel.
Right. The last update we got for these residents was a week ago, with Defense Minister Gallant speaking that this will be a very long, time-consuming process, and asking for these residents to have patience. Perhaps there's been some movement that could indicate what's happening here for these residents to be able to decide what their future is, because there appeared a large military exercise today, one in scale that we have not seen since October 7th. The forces that have been placed here have been placed in really a defensive posture. And you've noted that the strikes have been mostly retaliatory, but they have picked up offensively quite a bit in the last week or so with targeting Hezbollah before they are able to fire these ATGMs, before they fire on northern Israel. So it is curious to see this level of military exercises taking place here. Some of the outside observers and assessments, especially out of the U.S., are very concerned about the developments here, especially with the movement from Hezbollah that they're seeing. And it does appear that the IDF and the Israelis are following suit and matching that posture.
All right, Zach Anders there along the northern border with Lebanon. Thank you for that. Relic, what about that? We have this exercise that Zach mentioned along the northern, in the northern border area. We have, as he mentioned, Israel may be moving to more of an offensive deterrent posture, trying to strike these units rather than just react to the firing. Message to Hezbollah, but what kind of... But is that a deterrence, or is it liable to provoke Hezbollah to, for example, widen their field of fire beyond that sort of border area?
Obviously, the IDF is positioning itself to clear out the area between the border and the Litani River, because the 100,000 people who were displaced from their homes won't go back with Hezbollah on the border, or even in an eye contact with houses in Metula or Kiryat Shmone or other villages. And this will be the end game. So the question is how to get there. The order of the day is that diplomatic and political means through France, United States, to convince Hezbollah that this is serious.
Right. I'm just going to add, because we're going to discuss it later in the program, the French Foreign Minister, Catherine Colonna, in Israel today, supposedly is going to, I believe, to Lebanon to see if she can move things. The Lebanese government may be amenable to that, but as Zach pointed out, Hezbollah acts as its own government. So, you know, so far those diplomatic efforts haven't proven useful.
That is true, but these efforts precede the military onslaught. And that's the name of the game. You try, you show that you've tried everything, and when push comes to shove, then we'll go into a more offensive posture, but try to stay below something that will force Hezbollah to open a full-scale war and fire their tens of thousands of rockets to Israel, which will force Israel to eradicate part of the Hezbollah part in Beirut, and take out their infrastructure that is totally different from what happens in Gaza, because Lebanon is still a semi-European.
No, it's a sovereign country. Never mind, even it's a sovereign country.
They have infrastructure. Yes. And it's not there's no urban area between Israel and the Litani.
Right.
So it's a free field, totally different, and a lot faster than anything that we've seen.
That's something that's asked, because you are, of course, senior commander from the Air Force. Would air power be enough, or would Israel have to put some boots on the ground in southern Lebanon, as it did in the Second Lebanon War, to mixed effect? It's hard to imagine that while the ground forces are so engaged in Gaza.
My opinion is it can be done from the air in this particular case. Unlike the 2006, the type of information that we have and our ability to wield power, a lot of power, in a short time range, is a lot better than it was.
Right, and improved air defenses also, perhaps, from the Arrow and
even
Davis
though
Link.
we should expect to see a lot of missiles shot at Israel,
right.
But I think we can overpower the Hezbollah a lot faster than Hamas, because of the different nature of the ground.
Right. We're showing a map, actually, of Lebanon, and you could see pushing into Litani. There are those who feel, Jonathan, that what Relic just described is just a matter of time, that it's inevitable. I'm pessimistic about these diplomatic efforts spearheaded mainly by the U.S. and France, and that either during this war or the next war, Israel's going to have to take care of that issue.
And say that the diplomatic efforts succeed, and Hezbollah moves past the Litani River.
Sure.
Is that going to stay? Is that going to be the case for 2 years, 3 years, 10 years? The answer is probably no.
Sure.
We've all, in Gaza, we've said time and time again. We know that the next operation is just around the corner, something that was not said about Lebanon up until 2 years ago, I think, and now things have changed, and we see that Hezbollah is a threat. First, Israel cannot live with Hezbollah on the fence, period. That's something that cannot happen anymore. And second, even if Hezbollah is not on the fence, so they were back there in 2006. Eventually, step by step, Hezbollah got closer until it got to the fence. That is one issue. Second issue, we see that when there's a conflict, now it's with Gaza. Next time it could be with the West Bank or with Syria or with someone else, and of course with Iran. Hezbollah comes in and joins the party. So can Israel live with this forever and ever? The answer is no. So it may happen now, it may happen in 2 years, 3 years. One day it will probably happen, because Hezbollah will never ever accept the presence of the state of Israel, and will one day try to attack. It's a war that is bound to happen one day or the other.
Right. You mentioned a couple of Iranian proxies there in Hezbollah, its forces and militias in Syria, Iraq too, we could say. And then there's another, let's not forget, the Houthi rebels in Yemen, who are stepping up their campaign in those waters, those key coastal waters off of Yemen. Now, two of the world's largest shipping firms, the Mediterranean Shipping Company and CGM, just announced this weekend that they were suspending passage of their vessels through the Red Sea after attacks by those Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen. Now, the announcement follows similar decisions by other major shipping companies, which is threatening freedom of navigation in one of the world's most vital trade arteries, not just for Israel, but for other countries in the region and the world. Our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran has more on the implications of that in this report.
The world's biggest shipping companies are diverting their ships away from the Red Sea amid increased attacks by the Houthis in Yemen. The tidal wave of announcements comes as the U.S. and British navies shot down 15 suspected attack drones over the Red Sea on Saturday. The Iranian-backed Houthis said they launched a large batch of drones at Israel's southern city of Eilat and will continue their attacks as long as the war in Gaza carries on.
The Yemeni armed forces assure all ships heading to all ports around the world, except for the Israeli ports, that they won't be harmed but must keep their identifying devices open.
The Mediterranean shipping carrier MSC, along with French CMA CGM, said on Saturday that they were suspending passage to the Red Sea. This followed similar steps by Danish shipping giant Maersk, German-based shipper Hapag-Lloyd, Taiwanese Yangming, and Israeli shipping line Tzim, raising concern over the impact of the flow of goods through the major global trade corridor connecting Asia and Europe.
The Houthis represent a material threat to freedom of navigation, to commercial shipping, to lawful commerce, and they're doing so in a vital artery there at the Bab el-Mandeb and into the Red Sea. And the United States is working with the international community, with partners from the region and from all over the world to deal with this threat.
Despite the expected blow to its economy, Israeli leaders say they will respond to the Houthis' attacks in due course.
We are ready to act. We know what to do, and we will find the right timing to act. We are giving a chance in the maritime issue to the international system. If we reach a situation where we are the last option, we will know what to do.
And so, as the scale and frequency of Houthi attacks on Red Sea shipping reach unprecedented levels, the Pentagon is reportedly weighing its striking options. But after years of reluctance to act against Iran's proxies, these steps might turn out to be too little and too late.
And we should note the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is scheduled to come to Israel this week, certainly to deal with the Gaza situation and that situation in northern Israel with Hezbollah, but also the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea area. And Relic, let's look at that. We heard Yoav Gallant talking about Israel striking, but this is really an international issue. The U.S., France, it's also getting involved, all defensively. The question is if it's time for them to take some kind of offensive action against the Houthis, which presumably would be some kind of using air power. Certainly they don't want to put boots on the ground inside Yemen.
Yes, that's for sure. Remember that Bab el-Mandab's distance from Israel is farther than Tehran. So
Right.
it's not a next door
Right,
neighbor.
thousands of kilometers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So our ability to get real-time information or intelligence and strike there is obviously present, but I don't think we can take out the missiles or whatever, the infrastructure there. So we better leave that to other nations, and the consortium that seems to be getting along with the U.S. leading it and France and other countries probably can take care of this.
But will
with the
they?
Fifth
I mean, I'm
Fleet.
just going to note that last week, I think it was a group of former CENTCOM commanders said it is time for the U.S. to strike, or as U.S. leading an international coalition. Why hasn't that strike been taken? Presumably they have the air power to at least take out the some of the missile capabilities and certainly naval, whatever the naval capabilities there are of the Houthis.
Well, something to think about. The Houthis are not alone in this game. They're actually being operated by as proxies by Iran. So maybe it's time to let Iran know, or a small military operation at the Hormuz Straits along the Iranian border, because this is going to continue and Iran is going to continue playing. So do they deal with the Houthis or do they go to their operator? If they deal with the Houthis, technically, militarily, they shouldn't have a problem. So it's a question of decision. And in this case, it's the president's decision as the commander-in-chief in the U.S.
Right. I mean, there are those, Jonathan, who see that hesitation. I mean, the scenario is laid out by Relic, and that hesitation by the U.S. is the Biden administration's policy of trying to engage Iran rather than take it on more directly. And perhaps in this case, that emboldened Iran and the Houthis to start attacking the shipping, this international shipping there in the Red Sea.
Yes, it is already happening. We're seeing ships being attacked there. We're seeing companies, we saw that in the story, saying they will not use this passage. It's and let's remember, it's a major passage from the Indian Ocean into the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, and into the Mediterranean. It's a major shipping route which is now put under danger, and many in Israel feel that the international coalition led by the United States is not doing enough. One other thing, let's remember that Israel went to the 6-day war because the Straits of Tiran, being much closer to Israel, of course, were blocked.
By Egypt in that case. Yeah.
From Egypt in that case, thus blocking the passage of ships to Eilat, to the port of Eilat. Are we speaking pretty much of the same? Someone blocking the passage to Eilat, of course, the distance to Bab el-Mandab, to Yemen, being much farther. The situation is, of course, different, but there is a precedent in which Israel went to war, technically, because these straits were blocked.
Right. We should note, actually, it's Egypt and its Suez Canal, which is even more, perhaps, negatively affected.
I think they're affected even more than Israel, because much of the passage through the Suez Canal, which is giving Egypt a lot of money, will now be diverted.
Right. And there is talk already of diverting even a land bridge through the United Arab Emirates, through Jordan, for example, into Israel. So that is the people are talking about it, that's being denied. Gentlemen, stay with us. Earlier, just this evening, we heard Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari being grilled by reporters. Why didn't Israel detect that massive tunnel that was just revealed in Gaza, that was just revealed to the world today? And Israeli security and military officials have acknowledged intelligence failures that allowed Hamas to plan and execute the October 7th attacks. But new details have now emerged in a report from the New York Times, also describing how Hamas financed its activities with a portfolio of international investments, a financial network that Israeli leaders were allegedly aware of but did not shut down. Robert Swift takes a closer look at that.
As early as 2015, Israeli and US officials became aware of a network of companies that not only funded Hamas, but were owned and controlled by it. An empire that was worth an estimated $500 million. While organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda have frequently used fronts to launder money, Hamas's portfolio was a genuine enterprise, launched with seed money to go out to make a profit, the New York Times reports. It reportedly included mining, chicken farming and road building firms in Sudan, 2 skyscrapers in the United Arab Emirates, a property developer in Algeria, and Trend, a real estate company listed on the Turkish Stock Exchange. An Israeli financial intelligence team, Task Force Harpoon, began tracking the investments, flagging up their concerns to US counterparts and the Israeli cabinet. But the threat from Iran and the finances it distributed to its proxies, Hamas among them, ultimately eclipsed fears over the Hamas portfolio. And at the time, the Israeli Security Service's consensus was that money flowing into Gaza would help tame Hamas, rather than arming it for the next attack. A strategy led by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Regarding this published investigation, I am not familiar with it and I suggest you wait until after the war. A thorough examination and a thorough investigation of all these things will be done and the picture will become clearer.
While there were some sanctions placed on businesses and individuals in 2022, ultimately the flow of money from it was not disrupted. Money that Israeli intelligence assesses was directly invested into Hamas's military preparations.
Jonathan, we should note this information is based on a press report. We don't know the full circumstances. We don't know how much Israel knew, how much perhaps the Mossad or other agencies did actually deal with it. But I think the bigger picture here, as we saw in the that was raised, of course, by Robert, is this whole question, this conception that Hamas, in a sense, could be that its financial interests were great enough that it would not take a risk like it did on October 7th to bring that house tumbling down, a conception that we now know was badly mistaken.
Absolutely, and let's look more than that. It was all the time thought that Hamas would put first the interests of the citizens of Gaza. That is why it was thought that more work permits in Israel would do the job. More money coming in
from Qatar.
More money from Qatar going into Gaza would do the job. These images that we're seeing now, we're seeing exactly where the money came. The money went to, not for the residents of Gaza, for this. The workers coming in, we know that many of them were actually, I'll even call them spies, as much as that of what is happening in the communities and in the bases inside Israel. All the conception that Israel had of Hamas was completely wrong. The citizens of Gaza, they mean nothing to them, nothing more than human shields. That's all they are for. All they are for them, and I don't think they really did much to hide that. We heard a few weeks ago from one of the Hamas officials saying, "Yes, we took all the money and all the assistance for our tunnels, underground, because the people overground, they're refugees. It's the United Nations that should take care of them, and the assistance, everything that we get, this is used for our projects."
I think, Relic, what is a little frightening here is, go ahead, respond to.
Yes, I think this is, we're letting ourselves easy on that one.
It doesn't sound so easy to me, to be honest. I think we're being very critical, but go ahead.
Sadat, before the 73 war, said he is willing to put the lives of 1 million Egyptians to get the Sinai back, okay? And he meant what he said.
Right.
Hamas, their ideology is to fight Israel, even if it takes 100 years. And for them, as by the way, for other nations who'd gone to war in Second World War, etc., the idea of bringing a better future or some hope is more important than the lives of people. So this was all well known.
Right.
The money was coming in from Qatar and Iran anyway. So with all due respect to those 500 million in investments, that wouldn't have stopped the money. The basic thing that Israel has to deal with is the idea that we have weakened the Palestinian Authority and strengthened Hamas in order to stay, for the Palestinian Authority to stay weak, so that we can ward off the danger, so to speak, of a Palestinian entity in the West Bank. This was a decision made by our leaders at the time, and certainly Netanyahu. And in a way, this is a day of reckoning. We have to decide which we would prefer, if any.
All right. Well, this does go in the area of political decision making, which is still going on. In fact, it's still, because this relates to the argument about how much, whether, if and when the Palestinian Authority, if and then it comes to this so-called decide who will maintain civil authority in the Gaza Strip, whether it would be the Palestinian Authority or not. No easy choices to make. But we'll put that aside for now. I just want to go back to the unfortunate, tragic incident this weekend, the revelation of the 3 escaped hostages who were shot down by IDF troops, apparently mistakenly. Unfortunately, each new detail that comes out paints that in a more and more negative light. The actions of those troops, but we could understand whether the hearing that the soldiers were waving a white flag, they were not hostages, I'm sorry, speaking in Hebrew, wearing shirts. There was, I think, a photograph that come out, we don't know if we have it, in which they scrawled SOS basically on the side of a building. That maybe explain this picture, Jonathan.
Yeah, it says SOS and in English, and it says 3 hostages in Hebrew. This is the place. We heard from Rear Admiral Daniel Agari in his briefing, speaking about this place, saying that very close to the place that these 3 hostages were shot, this home was found with these paintings on the wall. I'll call them this way, and there's a possibility that they were also held in a nearby place. This was found now.
The point being, there should have been enough information available for those soldiers to hold their fire at that circumstances. We only have 30 seconds, but it's hard to discuss, to make that judgment.
While this, and when we look at this, it's not a very clear writing. But while saying this, there were also a lot of booby-trapped dolls speaking Hebrew and other ways to lure those warriors. So it's not something that we can categorically say that a soldier wouldn't feel that he's being heisted, so to speak.
Right, okay. Well, there'll be a thorough investigation, of course, on this. Relic Shafir, thank you for joining us on I-24 News. Jonathan Regev, I'll ask you please to stay with us, because while we are through with our first hour